Today, I am going to talk about the overview of macroeconomics. The reference of this discussion is based from the book of Dornbusch, Fisher, and Starts. We begin by discussing the two subfields or branches of economics. We have macroeconomics and microeconomics. Macroeconomics studies the behavior of the economy as a whole. Kumbaga, it studies the overall performance of the economy in terms of the level of output, employment, prices, and foreign trade. Microeconomics, on the other hand, studies how individual households and firms make decisions and interact with one another in markets. It deals with the behavior of individual elements in an economy. Examples of analysis or questions dealing with macroeconomics analysis are: what determines the amount of employment and unemployment? Or what determines the overall level of prices and the rate of inflation? And examples of questions that microeconomics seeks to answer are: how do consumers decide how much of each good to buy? Or how do firms decide how much output to produce and what price to charge? Or pwede rin, how do taxes on specific goods and services affect the allocation of resources? The macroeconomy has three central issues. We have persistent unemployment, inflation, and the growth of output. Unemployment is a term referring to individuals who are employable and actively seeking a job but are unable to find a job. Included in this group are those people in the workforce who are working but do not have an appropriate job. Unemployment is usually measured by the unemployment rate, which is derived by dividing the number of unemployed people by the total number of the labor force. Labor force, by the way, simply means the manpower or workforce of the economy. How about the students, the retirees, yung mga bata? Are they part of the labor force? No, the students, retirees, or yung mga bata are not part of the labor force. Inflation refers to an increase in the general level of prices in the economy. And output refers to the total production of the economy, which also called GDP or gross domestic product. As we go along in this course, we will discuss each of these issues more deeply. For now, we will just go through of these terms. These issues are related or could go together at least in the short run. For example, if there is high inflation, the economy also experiences low unemployment, and it can be seen also that the level of output has increased. The relationship between inflation and unemployment can be described using this diagram. This graph is called a Phillips curve. The Phillips curve is an economic concept developed by A.W. Phillips, stating that inflation and unemployment have a stable and inverse relationship. The theory claims that with economic growth comes inflation, which in turn should lead to more jobs and less unemployment. As seen in the graph, years with high unemployment showed low inflation, and the years with low unemployment, let's say this year, experienced high inflation. However, this relationship can be valid only in the short run. There are four areas of concern or goals of the macroeconomy na target ma-achieve. These are output, employment, prices, and international trade. When it comes to output, there must be high level of production and rapid GDP growth rate. This is to sustain the increasing rate of population. What will happen if GDP growth rate is lower than the population growth rate? Employment level must also be high in a way that workers can easily look for a job. Kanina, one of the issues of the economy is persistent unemployment. For the economy to be healthy, unemployment level must be low or within its normal level. Hindi rin pwedeng zero yung unemployment rate, guys. Kasi the factors of production or yung resources natin kailangan ding magpahinga. Di pwedeng 24 hours mo siyang ipa-work dyan. Yung lupa din kailangan mong ipahinga muna after the harvest season. There should be low involuntary unemployment and low underemployment. Involuntary unemployment is a situation where workers are willing to work at the market wage or just below but still unemployed. While underemployment occurs when a person does not work full-time or takes a job that does not reflect their actual training and financial needs. As I have mentioned earlier that unemployment is often measured by the unemployment rate. Labor force is equal to the sum of the number of employed and unemployed. So from the formula itself of labor force, we can derive the formula for the number of unemployed, which is equal to labor force minus the number of employed. Or the number of employed is equal to the labor force minus the number of unemployed. Well, labor force participation rate is equal to the total labor force divided by the total population of the economy. The next concern is about the level of prices. The objective is to have a stable price level of the economy. Stability of prices happens only under free markets or a market without distortions or a market that is governed by the interactions between buyers and sellers. But the economy often encounters changes in the price levels. Inflation rate can be used to measure the changes in the price level. It shows how the price level changes over time. Deflation is the opposite of inflation. It is a situation where the general level of prices has declined, and hyperinflation means too much inflation. So, nakakatakot na kung mangyayari ito sa isang economy. Kaya dapat ma-maintain yung stability of the price level. Lastly is about international trade since open economy tayo. And most, if not all, of the countries in the world are open economies. Open economy means there is international trade. There is exports and imports of goods and services. Open economy means that we transact with the other economies. So the goal is there should be equilibrium in export and import and stable din yung currency natin. Some terms related to open economy is net exports or the difference between exports and imports or X minus M. If the net export is positive, that means the value of export is greater than the value of import. Then there is trade surplus. Conversely, if the net export is negative, ibig sabihin, the value of export is less than the value of import. So there is trade deficit. To achieve those goals and objectives of the economy, the government uses policy instruments or tools. First is fiscal policy. To address high unemployment, for example, the government may create infrastructure projects such as roads, airports, etc. Ang tawag dito ay government expenditure. Through this infrastructure, the pool of unemployed individuals may be lessened because they are now working in those projects. Taxation is another example of fiscal policy. The government imposes taxes on goods and services to earn revenue. If the government wants to increase the economy's revenue, pwede niyang taasan yung tax rate or gagawa siya ng bagong tax scheme tulad ng train law. Another policy instrument ay monetary policy. It has something to do with the money supply of the country, na kontrolado naman ni BSP or Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. The BSP can increase or decrease the money supply by creating policies such as low or high interest rates or reserve requirements. Similarly, the government, not just the BSP, can also buy or sell bonds to the public, thus again affecting the money supply. Another tool that the government can use is related to international transactions. Trade policies such as tariffs and quotas restrict imports on goods and services. Tariffs are tax on imported goods, while quotas or quota is a government-imposed trade restriction that limits the number of monetary value of goods that a country can import or export during a particular period. Exchange rate policies also, we have fixed exchange rate or an exchange rate that is set or determined by the government, and flexible exchange rate, or it is a rate that is determined by global supply and demand of currency. In other words, they are prices of foreign exchange determined by the market that can rapidly change due to supply and demand and not controlled by the government or the BSP. Lastly, we have income policy. It attempts to restrict wage and price changes in an effort to slow inflation. One example of this policy is the minimum wage law. The purpose of minimum wages is to protect workers against unduly low pay. However, there are limitations or shortcomings of these policy instruments. There is uncertainty with regards to the effects of the instruments. Since the economy changes over time, sometimes the policy that created today may not be effective in the years to come, or hindi siya applicable sa ibang lugar. Another is timing considerations of the effects. Usually, once may ipapatupad na batas, di mo na siya kaagad na i-implement, or madaming prosesong dadaanan pa, or kung halimbawang na-approve na siya, pwedeng staggered yung pagkabigay. Halimbawa, yung salary increase ng government employees. Usually, binibigay siya ng paunti-unti. Kumbaga, hindi full amount ang naibibigay kaagad kung sakaling merong salary increase. And lastly, the choice of objectives. Sometimes, magkasalungat din yung effect ng policies created with regards to objectives na gustong mangyayari. Halimbawa, the minimum wage law. Its primary objective is to help raise the salary or earnings of the workers. But it turns out that this policy also causes a labor surplus or unemployment of the economy. So, meron siyang negative effects, although in the first place, it was designed to help the workers.